welcome to this panel event. I'm delighted to be chairing this with you today, our discussion on education leaders incorporating tech into the business model. Just to introduce myself first, my name's Chloe, I'm the Director of Operations at Multiverse, but I am delighted to be welcomed by an incredible panel and joined by their amazing expertise. And I want to kick straight off with introductions from them. Rajay, do you want to start? Tell us a bit about yourself, what's brought you here today, and perhaps something about what is your educational passion, what keeps you going with the work that you do.
Hi, Chloe. It's great to be with you all and with Natasha and Saranjit as well. So my name is Rajay Nayak. I'm Chief Executive at Skilled. We support universities with their transition to online programs. We do that with pathway programs, with online degrees, with micro-credentials, and then we also deliver digital skills courses focused on what we call 21st century skills, which we're happy to talk about a bit in a short while. The key thing that drives me the main thing to know about me is that I'm from Coventry. I'm a huge fan of Coventry. I have had a passion for my city from the day I was born, and that's probably what's driven me in education. I started off my career in local government, in Coventry City Council, then went into central government, but then found my way into education and had 5 wonderful years as director at the OU, was part of the team that set up FutureLearn back in the day, and then co-founded KeyPath and was chief exec there for 4 years. And so, have essentially loved the social mobility aspect of, I think, what all 4 of us do, in that you can do things that make a difference, you can do things that move the needle, you can do things with a social impact that's really tangible as well. But crucially, you also get to solve challenges, create growth, be part of something that really changes the world in the most powerful and transformative way. And what a better time to be doing what we do than a time when technology and education are coming together. And that's why I think this discussion is going to be a fascinating one.
Couldn't agree more. Saranjit, coming to us from Upgrad, what is your educational passion, and can you tell us a little bit about yourself as well?
Absolutely. Firstly, thank you so much for the introduction, Chloe, and it's a pleasure to be with all of you, Rajay, Natasha, on this panel. I'm Saranjit. I am the CEO of Upgrad EMEA. Upgrad is one of the largest online higher education platforms. We work with reputed universities across the world, as well as industry experts, to create content which is designed in a way to provide positive career outcomes to our learners. We are present across the globe in about 85 plus countries, and we have a learner base of 2 million plus. A little bit about what drove me towards education and my passion towards this field. So I've been in tech for the past 15 years, and I'm quite passionate about the impact technology has on our lives. So when I got an opportunity where education could marry tech, and we had an opportunity to make education accessible, affordable, and relevant to millions of young adults across the world, for me, just that vision and mission was just so powerful to come on board. And I really hope that us at Upgrad, in collaboration with universities and different institutions, could make this dream a reality.
Amazing. I love that language of mission driven and accessible tech to drive social mobility. So much bringing us together today as a panel. And Natasha, joining us perhaps from a more traditional educational institution, the University of Oxford. What is it that drives you, and what can you tell us about yourself?
Yeah, sure. And great panel. I'm really pleased to be here today. Very exciting chat we're about to have. So I'm Natasha. I'm the Director of IT Service Delivery and Change at the Said Business School, which is part of the University of Oxford. I am heavy on that change part of my role. That's the bit that drives me. So I've always been fascinated in change, cultural change, organisational change, and also technology. I worked in technology for 23 years, and then I went out into the change management space, and I've been doing organisational change for about 7, and now I've brought that back into IT. So it feels like the right time for IT to be talking about that organisational change, especially with the last 18 months that we've all just lived through. And also with the education side, I think so much is happening there change-wise with our learners, and the way that people consume education now, the way that they want to learn, the fact that things are so accessible, the fact that they're so short, the fact that people watch things for a matter of seconds rather than hours, as was more traditional, all of that fascinates me, and how we're going to keep up with these young learners and the way that they want to consume nowadays. So that's definitely my passion.
Fantastic. And Natasha, that actually tees perfectly up and what I wanted to talk about first. It feels almost cliche to start a panel and say, what a year at this stage. But I think over the past year, we have seen a huge amount of change, obvious shifts, the need to move online, to work out how to deliver all of our assessments online, to deliver apprenticeships and practical applied learning online, but actually probably some less obvious ones that have been just as impactful for you and the learners that you work with. I'm keen to hear what you consider to be the biggest change or shift within the sector you've seen in the last 18 months. Natasha, you mentioned a bit there about like kind of how learners process information. Has that been the key one for you, or is there something else that really stands out?
I think it was more about losing that in-person experience, which for our students, that's something that they always put right up there. So in all of the feedback, it's all about the networking and the types of people that they meet and those experiences and how enriching it is on top of their learning. So, of course, without having that in person and pivoting everything to online, we wanted to create other ways of having these communities still. People were self-organising with WhatsApp, and we obviously had LinkedIn groups and so on. But it was really looking at what else could we do and working with some of our online students and participants about how they wanted to stay connected afterwards. So we've started to build communities, and that's been one of my projects, and working with that customer feedback has been really helpful. So what is it exactly that they're missing? How can we replace it with an online experience? What would we need to keep them connected and keep them engaged, which would be different to an in-person experience, especially when you think about their access to faculty, their access to wonderful college dinners within Oxford and all of that really enriching experience, their access to all of our events that we do in the building, and it's a beautiful building, and then turning that into online and the challenges that come with that. So I've really enjoyed that project, and it continues. Obviously, we continue to grow and add new communities, but that's been a really important part, alongside with that teaching and learning experience, and putting all of that onto online and really thinking about what do you have to do over and above to engage those students when they're not in the room with you, or how do you blend having some people in the room and the majority online, and all of that we're all struggling with at the moment in the hybrid world as we learn and go along.
And Sanji, I suppose slightly different from you, my understanding is you've been using an online model for a longer period of time. So that shift might not have been so significant, but what did you find was different as the world changed in the last 18 months?
Right. So you're right. The EdTech companies have been growing pre-pandemic, but I guess post-pandemic, there has been an acceleration in digital adoption. So there are two trends that I've seen in the EdTech industry. One is around the digital adoption, and the second is around motivations. So as I mentioned, even in the digital adoption, if you look at the two different segments, one is the K-12 segment. It was kind of driven by necessity. The kids can no longer go to schools anymore, but they still have to continue with education, and they didn't have an option but to adopt online. However, if you look at the motivations for the adult upskilling market or the lifelong learning market, the motivations were completely different. These working professionals that suddenly were sat at home and were saving on the commuting time and therefore had more time to spend online. That was one of the biggest motivations as per the surveys that we recently conducted. However, an interesting part was another bit, which was around a lot of furloughs and a lot of skills gap in digitalization. So as per the World Economic Forum, they predicted 75 million jobs would be lost by 2022. But that the situation is not all grim, because 133 million new digital jobs would be created. But what that did was expose a big need of the skills gap in the current present market. And I think a lot of the working professionals that come to a platform have preempted a certain upskilling, reskilling that is required, which is not necessarily met by their or companies or any other institutions. And those are the kind of people that proactively came to our platform to start consuming some of the programs that we are offering for upskilling and reskilling. So I think we did see a big trend, one in adoption, and the second in shift in motivation levels.
Yeah, that certainly resonates in what we saw. We saw companies coming to us for apprenticeships in the digital space, the data space in particular, everything from the NHS, who genuinely will need, we need help to predict bed capacity. We're using yesterday's bed capacity and adding a bit. What if we could use last year's plus the local COVID rate? As you say, a really keen desire to meet that upskill need, and with that interesting recognition as well of the changing job market. And Rajay, I suppose as well, I'm interested to hear what you think there is to learn from sort of these more technology-led business models. How have they led the way, do you think, in this space?
It's a good question, Chloe. I mean, I don't want to kind of repeat anything that Natasha and Saranjit have said already. I completely echo everything that they've shared. I think I'd add a few, and just kind of on the business models point you just mentioned there. I mean, number one is the traditional higher education sector all over the world has done a Herculean job, right? I think we have to recognize that over the last 18 months. Sometimes you've got centuries of tradition that kind of sits there, and in the space of weeks, they've moved their whole provision online. That has been nothing short of extraordinary. And all the sectors around the world have done that in the most incredible way. I think there's a few things that we're seeing as we begin to come out of the pandemic, although, Australia, we've got a lot of colleagues there and we work with institutions there. They're still seeing a really tough time. They're going to see a big drop in international student numbers. The US has already seen challenges. The UK, by the way, has some opportunities in relation to that. But we've got to recognize it's a mixed picture around the world. So that's one thing I'd say. Second thing I'd say is there has been a dual impact, I think, on individuals. On the one hand, you've got a big group of individuals, and by the way, this is the same in companies like Saranjit's and ours, and probably in Multiverse as well, like the kind of newer companies. You've got people who have loved this period, people who've really embraced it and seized it and been able to create new rules and create a new culture and all of that kind of stuff. And then the people that really struggled. And I think we have to recognize both. But the second thing I'd say is that COVID, from my perspective at least, it's kind of changed everything, and it's almost changed nothing. The trends that were existing in December of 2019 are still the ones that are driving post-COVID. The move towards globalization, the move towards more international students, the move towards more technology, the move towards more hybrid, the move towards more modular and bite-size and micro-credentials, the move towards a greater focus on employability and 21st century skills. All of these things were already going on pre-pandemic. COVID is simply an accelerant of the shifts that were already going on before Christmas of 2019. I think the point that I'd make that's related to that is the enormous growth and expansion we've seen in public-private partnerships. We would never have had a call from Cambridge like the one that we did in March of 2019, for example, March of 2020, were it not for the pandemic, right? They would not have needed to move online at that pace. They would not have kind of said, look, our rivals in the US, Stanford, Yale, Harvard, have been doing this for years. Help us, because we want to move, very swiftly online. And that then led to, what we've announced in the last few months around the 50 short courses in Cambridge Advanced and partnerships like that. So, you've seen very traditional institutions, if I can use that expression, making decisions they wouldn't otherwise have made. And that's, I think, a really exciting phenomenon. A couple of things we need to keep an eye out for. Number one, quality has been extraordinarily diffuse in its definition over the course of the last 18 months. And we know what great asynchronous learning looks like online. We know what great synchronous learning looks like online. I think the 4 institutions you've got around this table, know what that looks like. We've got to make sure that, there's a gold standard there, and that's adhered to. The second is that we need to support our people. It's not about the technology, it's about the people. And it's about, two constituencies in particular. Firstly, our learners, obviously, and then secondly, it's about our tutors and our academics and our teachers and others who've got to go on this journey with us, and making sure that they're supported on that journey and that they get closer to their students and that kind of thing, I think is really important. Finally, I think that we've got to recognise both the benefits but also the disadvantage of technology. There's too much hyperbole in this space, right? Many of us would love to be having this conversation face to face, and so recognising that it's not quite the same thing, but there are benefits that you can't get on campus sometimes, like the data, like the analytics, like the ability to track performance in real time. All of those sorts of things are amazing benefits. So I think some sobriety in the conversation, some recognition of the really tangible benefits that we've got to kind of seize from all of this is another thing that I think we're beginning to see, and is a really exciting part of the kind of new hybrid reality that Natasha was talking about.
I love your pragmatism, Vijay. That's definitely the right approach. And it's interesting you mentioned there that all of these trends are things we would have seen 18 months ago. Natasha, I'm interested in, were there sort of adaptations you were already thinking about that you just accelerated, or were there things that you have fundamentally sort of changed and transformed, and how's that balance been in the way that you've sort of had to adapt and pivot towards that tech-led approach?
Yes, and there are two levels in the school really, because one would be the staff and the fact that possibly people worked from home once every 2 to 3 weeks. I mean, it really was not something that was done across the school at all, and definitely not across the university. People generally turned up 5 days a week, which I wasn't used to. So I found the move home very easy. It's something I've been used to for years and years, but that change for people was enormous. So with everything else going on, that was something that some people had simply never done. It was amazing all our technology worked. Day one, there were no hitches. That was something that I absolutely pulled out as a positive. Look, our IT provision has been fantastic. All our staff are just up and running. But that mindset of right now I'm at home, especially not knowing for how long it was going to be, that was absolutely huge. On the learning side of things, that's digital experience and asynchronous, synchronous. It's not something that was brand new to the school by any means. We had the Hive for many years, and it's something that we've been using, and especially in executive education, we've got a whole raft of online courses as well. So from that point of view, it wasn't brand new, but then to wholesale shift everything to online, that was a very big ask, and not necessarily from a technology point of view, although it was, but definitely from a person point of view. I think there are people that, and absolutely to go back to Rajay's point about people and how we are, some people being fine at home, some people really missing having those interactions with others. And I think as a faculty member and teaching, if you really do get that kind of richness from your learners and having that full experience and being completely immersed in your lecture theatre, in your classroom, to suddenly feel that one step removed must have been incredibly hard. And so from that point of view, I think that change curve was enormous and incredibly rapid, and something where you just had to do it. So there was no taking the time to think about how this was affecting you and recognizing that, perhaps you're not feeling happy about it, and then noticing that you're starting to accept it. It was just literally, we're doing this. So you're online. This is how we're teaching. This is the support that you can get from the IT guys, and which was superb support. I mean, we really did help people and went that step further. The teaching and learning aspect, what does that mean? Being online, what do you have to shift? What are the nuances? What are the things you're going to miss? And when you're in the lecture theatre, of course, it's those facial expressions, because the camera isn't directly in your face. You are a figure standing and you've got your whiteboard behind you. So what does that mean about your expressions? Do you use your hands more? How do you engage that audience? And we were able to offer all of those conversations to faculty and associate fellows and so on, to make sure that we did get that rich experience and that gold standard that we're talking about. So yes, I really did see it on two halves, but I think the shift for the staff was possibly harder. I think that was more of a shock and sort of catapulted the whole university into a new way of working that, of course, we would have got there, but forced to get there, it's probably years ahead of what they were thinking.
Absolutely. I'm fascinated this theme coming up between this idea of a gold standard, but also, you know, we all know, as Raju said, there's that our learners, but actually the gold standard comes from our tutors, our coaches, those people in delivery. I wondered if any of you have thoughts on that intersection. How can we be the trailblazers for a gold standard? How do we create and codify and share what good looks like? Now, we've been doing it, whether it's for 18 months or 18 years, depending on where you work. How do we go about making sure that a rising tide lifts all boats?
I could give like a tech perspective on this whole equation.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to take a step back and talk about how technology plays a role in providing that gold standard in content and delivery for education. But if you look at the role of technology in all of education, it has come in waves. The first wave was a lot about making content accessible, and we saw a rise in MOOCs. The second wave was a lot about engagement and completion rates, and that's when we saw a rise of SPOCs and OPMs. And the third wave that we are in right now is a lot about an outcome-driven approach and personalization and using technology to deliver that. So companies, there are a lot of companies, including such as Upgrad and I'm sure even Skill, where we use big data and AI to deliver a very personalized approach, which is what we can actually, try and compare to the gold standard. What I mean by that is for every learner on our platform, for example, we get about 250,000 data points. And through those data points, we are able to now define personas and their behavioral patterns on how they consume any content, when do they go back and rewind, and what kind of portion do they actually revisit, what time do they log in, how much time do they spend. And that helps us actually feed into the AI to now start delivering content which is very personalized to one individual. And when you marry that, the use of AI with a very human-centric approach, with a proper network of mentors, of student support, of industry experts to help you, of faculty members, that combination really helps us deliver a very personalized human approach for learning online. And then you can add in more technological elements like gamification. How do you replicate the social elements online? And gamification has a role to play. And I'm sure in future there are more technology and more features that could be. There are a lot of companies already working on, making it a little bit more interactive online to replicate some of the social elements. So this is how I feel that by the use of technology, by the use of a very solid delivery and content from the faculty members, and adding a bit of a human touch, we are able to provide that gold standard for delivery online.
Anyone else want to jump in on that one?
I think it's spot on, Saranjit. I mean, I just extend it a little bit more to say that the great thing about technology is it really democratizes access. And that is almost the most powerful thing. And what do I mean by that? I mean that there's something about the fact that a lecture theatre requires you to attend, in person and physically. And so, it obviously enables you to extend access to sometimes disabled students, members of the armed forces, people that are traveling, people with jobs, people with kids, everything else. And that's a beautiful thing, right? And all four of us are doing that inside our organizations. The second thing that it does as well is to democratize access to understanding, information, transparency, all of that kind of stuff. What do I mean by that? The best content tends to emerge much more visibly, I think, online than it does in a kind of conventional space, where if you think about it, the ways that we've traditionally made decisions, historically, is on historical reputation and measures like that. Whereas actually, for online programs, it's the stuff that emerges via SEO, it's the stuff that emerges via rankings, it's the stuff that emerges via reviews and personal recommendations and that kind of stuff. And that's a beautiful thing, because it means that it really puts the onus, frankly, on all four of us as providers to make sure that we're building really high quality, really immersive, really rich, really impactful content and experiences. And I think that's a really exciting part of the kind of next 5-10 years that we're moving into. And I think that move from free to fee, from informal to formal, some of those sorts of learning journeys are going to be fascinating as well. I think the move towards more personalized and adaptive learning, we're testing some software now where you can track where people are looking on a screen, and iris recognition software, and then you can adapt and personalize learning in the next module according to, Chloe looks at the bottom left more than Natasha looks at the top right, and that kind of stuff, which is, I think, really, really interesting. And then I think looking at how assessment changes in light of all of that and making it far more orientated towards the outcomes that employers and industry and others are looking for. I think that's the next wave as well that's going to be fascinating. So lots to come. And the thing I remind everyone is that we're on page 2 of chapter 3 of this whole story, right? We're nowhere yet, and there's so much more to come.
Absolutely. That links nicely to another theme that I've been thinking about, which is all of you in your own way have disrupted the space or kind of sought to make progress. But one of the things I'm sort of ex-secondary teacher in me always comes back to is, no matter how big a disruptor gets, they're probably still never going to match the size and scale of something like state secondary education. What do you think we can do to ensure that the advances being made by the most forward-thinking institutions are ones that everyone can benefit from? Throwing that one out to the floor.
So just given Natasha and Sarah pausing for a second, I think that's probably, Chloe, the question that we kind of write down for one of these conversations, but it's probably not the question that's going to get us to the answer we really want to get to. Why? Because I think it's okay for everyone to play different roles in this space. I think having an ecosystem, having an orchestra, as I describe it sometimes, where each part plays its own thing and then it creates this beautiful whole, that's okay. And so, I look often to Asia and the US when I'm thinking about those sorts of questions, right? Because they've tended to be a bit more disruptive, a few more years before us, which is fine, by the way, because then we just, learn from the lessons. And if you look at those countries, for the US, for example, you've got institutions like Southern New Hampshire, Arizona State, a whole host of others who've been doing online for a long, long, long time, and they do it exceptionally well. And now their online numbers are far greater than their on-campus numbers. They're world leaders in that space. They've built big industry collaboration, and they kind of are doing what they're doing. Equally, institutions like Harvard and Yale and Stanford have created their online divisions. HBX and others do great, but equally they have their very teaching-intensive, face-to-face focused, research-driven, kind of campus-based institutions. And so they're creating that plurality within their own institutions. And then equally, you have more of a college degree. You have great brands like Multiverse now coming into the US. You have players that play in different price segments and that kind of thing. And I think that plurality is what we really want to be getting to. Now, yes, we've got to try and get to that gold standard a little bit. Yes, we've got to have some common framework within that. Yes, we've got to make sure that we protect the consumer, the student, and make sure that there aren't bad practices where people, get screwed around by kind of companies that aren't trying to do the right thing. But I think actually allowing enough space and innovation, I think is really, really important, because otherwise the risk is that, we all become homogenous, we all become generic, we kind of try and copy each other. And I think that would be a shame at a time when you can create lots of different business models, lots of different versions of great, lots of different definitions of what brilliant teaching and learning can be for different audiences, given that's where we're moving to with lifelong learning and this range of qualifications and courses and experiences. That's my kind of cop-out answer, given the pause in conversation.
I think to build on that, it also allows the consumer to have choice, right? And that's the really important part, is that not everybody learns the same. Not everybody gets excited by a classroom, but then not everybody gets excited by doing something online. So giving them the option of all the different types of way to consume and the really clever ways, the gamification, which is fantastic. It's not for everybody. You know, the different ways that we can offer these opportunities out. And again, and coming back to the point that it is accessible, and then you can say that it is for anyone. That is fantastic. But there is still a consumer and a customer that wants to come into a classroom and wants to see that faculty member and hear about their research and listen to this person that they've read about and they've researched, and that's the reason why they've chosen that particular place to go and learn. And I can't see that going away. And although I am very technical minded and I am really excited by all the things that are happening, when I listen to our students, and especially our MBA students, but also our executive education students, they are saying that the bit that they love apart from the networking is that faculty member and what they're learning from them, and they want more access. They want to be able to have one-on-ones. They want these sort of communities and the networks where they can ask them questions. They want to be part of their research groups. They want to help them navigate new areas to do more online, or that they want that one-on-one or one in a group, but with that faculty member, and that has not changed. I'm still hearing that. That was what I heard when I first joined the school, and I'm still hearing it now. So everything else that we put around it, that's what we're doing. We're putting it around it. That experience is what they're after. And maybe that's a University of Oxford thing, and that's why I hear this very consistent feedback, but I really do.
It certainly sounds like it resonates with what Saranjit was saying about like human centric. You know, it's not, it's maybe we talk a lot about, it's not the difference between online and in person, it's the difference between human to human and, you know, and not. And that doesn't have to come through, that can come through so many different mechanisms, and people will have preferences about which mechanism it comes through. Saranjit, I jumped in there. Did you have any other thoughts on that idea?
Yes, I think to add on to what Rajay and Natasha both said, I see that there is an opportunity. I mean, there is, as Rajay said, there is a room for everyone to play in this ecosystem. And to Natasha's point of making it accessible for students who actually want to come in, I think there is a opportunity to collaborate. I see the role of tech-led organizations and of state universities being more collaborative versus combative. And the rationale being that the audiences that we reach out to are very different. You know, for traditional universities, you are reaching out to audiences who do have the desire to come and be sat in the university and take the entire program. But if you look at majority of the population who do not have the means, either they are in the wrong geography or they just cannot afford to take a break and come, you know, their livelihoods depend on it. So providing the access to those target audiences or learners through a collaborative approach is also something that I see could be very well established in this ecosystem. In fact, I do see how UK can play a role in being one of the biggest exporters of education globally by actually using a collaborative approach.
Amazing. I love the collaboration, and that idea of choice being paramount is so important. We've even found with our programs, when we were thinking, well, what's the model after we've been fully remote, we've designed two, because some people will still want to be fully remote and some people will want to have in-person touch points. And exactly what you've said there, I think the point is about choice, not about having, we definitely don't want to become homogenous, as you said, Rajay. That's really important. The last question for me then, we talked about what has changed, but I'm interested in what is going to change. I loved that idea that you said, Saranjit, about these three waves that we've had so far. We've had accessibility, we've had engagement, and now we're in this sort of outcome-driven and personalisation wave. Maybe that resonates for all of you, maybe you think it's been slightly different, but what's coming next? Is it a continuation of that third wave and patterns that we've already seen, or is there something on the horizon that you think we haven't maybe yet discussed or considered?
So as far as the future is concerned, I think that is yet to be seen. But as far as the trends are concerned and what we see coming, as I have already discussed, there has been a lot of focus on outcome-driven approach. I think learners are now looking for a very clear outcome at the end of the program. There was a survey that was conducted where 64% of the millennials did not feel confident that they had the right skills to do the jobs that they are doing. And hence, I think the future would be in the theme of collaboration, where the governments, the universities, and the companies come together to, design curriculums that are more focused on making the candidates job ready. Technology is evolving really rapidly. 29% of the jobs that exist today did not exist 5 years ago. And I think that percentage number is just going to increase in the next 5 years. And therefore, a collaborative theme of making our learners job ready would be the future that we should all be working towards.
Fantastic. Natasha, did you have any thoughts? What's coming next in the university sector or the business school sector in particular?
Well, I would actually just want to comment on that as a parent, Saranjeet, because I just think with all those new jobs and the fact that, as somebody that is used to traditional jobs, for example, how on earth do you help your children know what's coming and the possibilities that are out there? And this is really where education plays a huge role in getting them job ready. You're just so right there, because that sort of traditional classroom and the learning that they're doing, and in the A levels in the UK, and then going on to do your degree. But then there's this enormous new world. Who helps them navigate that? And it is about letting them know what the new possibilities are and getting them ready for that. And I think many parents would be completely lost, to be honest, especially given that, we had traditional jobs, and I, for one, was told I could only have one of 3 careers. So things have changed so incredibly rapidly. And I think it's really important that we keep up with that, and that for the learners, they understand that we're getting them ready for the world. And it is, although, obviously, and especially at the business school, we also get people who just love learning. We get people who come back and they do different courses with us, and then they'll contact me and say they've gone off somewhere else and they're doing something new. And you've got people that are really into the learning side of things, and they just keep adding. And you've got people who are very focused, they're already in their career, they want to add to their leadership skills, or they want to do the executive MBA, they want to come in, learn more, go back into their jobs, do something new, climb. So there are many different aspects, I think, within the school and what we're looking at. Next for us, we're definitely still on our personalisation journey, it's fair to say. I think having that time to get everything online and really focusing on that, and that experience, the learning experience being as rich as it would be in person, has consumed a lot of time and a lot of energy and effort from the IT services side. We are looking at personalisation, we are looking at these communities and building on those and being able to get better feedback loops. So really bringing our students into our product management and development, so that we're listening to them and we are building products that they will love, rather than having a project that gets delivered and you walk away. So there's a lot going on in bringing them into that journey and making sure that we are personalising with them in mind. And of course, they are all different learners, so there are many different aspects that we have to look at, and different offerings that we want to make sure we've got for them. But yeah, there's a lot coming up. I think the next year is going to be one of the busiest ones in the school. Even though the last 18 months have been crazy, I can only see it getting busier.
As Rajay said, the book's not even started yet, Natasha. There's a long way to go. Rajay, what do you see coming next? What's you've talked about where we are and this idea that we are just at the beginning of this story. What might be in the next chapter?
I think anyone that properly answers that question and pretends that we know exactly what's going to happen is talking nonsense, right? And the last 18 months have been testament to that. We know the broad trends, right? We've talked about them for the last half an hour. And I think, everyone in the room, everyone listening knows them. So I won't repeat those. I think this word collaboration is a hugely important one. We've moved from a world where we used to have rigid hierarchies and very established kind of structures and organizations and that kind of stuff. I mean, the Great Resignation is part of this as well, that we're all seeing. And then, we're moving to a world of more fluid networks, and more plural networks and all of that kind of stuff. And I think that's fascinating. And that need, as a result, for greater collaboration and the move away from some of those entrenched hierarchies is fascinating. I'll give you 2 quick examples that might be useful and instructive. One is what we're doing with Skilled Digital, where we've now got universities to the point where we're embedding a micro-credential as part of university degree programs that focus on 21st century skills. And those are courses built in partnership with industry. They're asynchronous and asynchronous. They're focused on a range of kind of digital topics and kind of workplace skills, teamwork, communication, leadership, that kind of stuff. But they're embedded as part of an institution's programs. They're embedded within their VLE. They're embedded and fully white labeled. You'd never have had that before, right? Because, my degree is my degree and that's what we're going to do and that's the way it's going to be. And the recognition that we can bring in expertise from the outside, from the commercial world, different pace sometimes, different approach, I think is fascinating. And I think that's a really healthy sign of how universities were embracing those sorts of partnerships in a way, 10 years ago, I could never have imagined some of the stuff we've had, more recently. The second is, I think, a really important sense of collaboration between government, the private sector and the public sector. And all three of those kind of constituencies coming together is absolutely vital. We've not kind of talked about this publicly in any detail yet, but it's beginning to come out that Skilled is kind of leading the design and delivery of Help to Grow Management, which is what the Chancellor announced in the budget in March. And it's a really fascinating experiment, where we've got 30,000 business leaders on the programme. It's focused on, core skills that we need post-pandemic in the economy. We've got 51 business schools that are delivering the course, and working really closely with Skilled on that. And you've got a private sector partner, driving the kind of the design of the program and stuff. And so that, I think, is a really instructive example. There are plenty of others of really bringing together those very different sectors, but in the most exciting ways. And you can see that it works, right? It works with transparency and clear communication and solid relationships and all of that kind of stuff. We have to accept that sometimes it's tricky and sometimes that that's complicated. But I think it's a really, really exciting part of the future. And I think those people and organizations that can be agile, that can be flexible, that can be responsive, that can be open-minded, that can, sometimes just reach out and have a weird conversation, and that leads to something really interesting. That's what the future is going to be about. And I think, therefore, it's going to be about a mindset, about a recognition of, things will change. We don't quite know what that chapter looks like, but we all want to be on that journey, and we're all driven by the same sorts of motivations and drivers to make Coventry a better place. That's the stuff that will make the chapter, I think, really an exciting one, and probably the most exciting we've had to date.
What a brilliant note to end on, Rajay. I feel excited. I have to say, what a privilege to be with such a passionate panel and people who care so deeply about sort of the same aims and outcomes. I think as well, like, what an endorsement of the importance of panels like this. The two themes that have come out the most strongly for me are the importance of community and building networks to be able to advance common aims, but also this need to collaborate. And I think in particular from today, to collaborate across diverse institutions. We don't want people to do the same things, which means we're all doing amazing different things where we can learn from each other. So a fantastic endorsement of the panel and of the event. I hope that those listening have enjoyed it and that you enjoy the rest of London Tech Week. Thanks very much for joining.
Thank you.